This is Death or Prison, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. We bring you stories of hope and encouragement.
Hello and welcome to the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my right, Mr. Raul Lopez, and to my left, our guest this day, Will Sauveur.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Definitely welcome, brother. We're going to talk to you about things that have gone on in your life. We're going to talk about what it was like growing up in Fort Pierce, Florida, and what eventually led to a 23-year sentence. Were there any days or months attached to that, or was it just a flat 23 years?
Flat 23.
Flat 23 years. Life growing up in Fort Pierce, Florida.
It was tough, generally. In Fort Pierce, everybody that's around there is familiar with it. It's pretty tough. I'm Haitian American, so from my perspective, I think it was a little bit tougher. You know what I mean? Because we dress different, speak different, look different, act different, come from a different place, different culture, different language, different everything. So just trying to fit in is a little bit difficult, a lot difficult, especially being in the projects, hood, stuff like that. So yeah, it was tough.
Will, were you born in Haiti or born in the United States?
I was born right here.
Oh, you were born here.
Born right in the
okay.
United States.
But your parents came over from Haiti.
Yes, sir.
Mom and dad both in the home at that time?
My mom and dad was in the house. My dad was there up until I was 8 years old. Yeah, so at 8 years old, he got deported when I was 8. He was gone for about 2 years while my mom worked like 2 or 3 jobs off and on, trying to save money to get him back. So that was even rougher. You know what I'm saying? So I'm, firstborn kid. I remember him being gone. That was a big thing. And then he came back. But again, he came back after those 2 years, and it got even tougher a little bit. Working in the groves, picking fruit, doing all the jobs that nobody else wants to do, working, packing houses, that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
How did you handle that transition? You said you were 8 when he first was deported, and then he's kind of out of the picture, and mom has to take on more jobs. Usually when there's a shift in your life that kind of affects you. Did it affect you, school, your social surroundings?
Looking back at it, it definitely affected me. While you actually live in it, though, you don't really recognize it because it's life. It's life. It's what you have to do. I'm a firstborn, so a lot of duties around the house you got to pick up. You know what I'm saying? I got to take care of my little brothers and sisters, clean up, make sure they're not running around, getting in trouble. Do dishes, cook, that kind of thing. So I think looking back at it, hindsight, I was forced to grow up a little bit older, but at that time it was just normal. It's just what you do. You step up. Mom needs help. You just step up.
What's interesting, Will, you were talking about when your dad left. I believe it's about 83% of people that are incarcerated today either didn't have a father or he was there and worked all the time and didn't spend time with the kids. So that's a common denominator. We're definitely designed to have that father figure in our lives. That's why Jesus becomes so imperative later on, and we take him as a father. In my case, my father was there, so I'm the exception. But I know most people that did time, doing time, there was a vacancy, there was a hole there when it comes to the father. So
it was definitely, I love my dad. He was a good dude. You know what I'm saying? I distinctly remember it was a lot of good. You know what I mean? I got disciplined from him maybe twice in my whole life. But he was always giving me positive, insights on things, always teaching me stuff. He's always taking me around with him. I hung around with him and his friends, you know what I mean? So I definitely felt the void. When he was gone, I definitely felt it.
I grew up in a rough neighborhood, and like Raul, I did have, my dad there for the whole time, but I had friends who, when things became financially difficult, they usually took to the elements of the neighborhood, there was always a way to help yourself out, whether it was legal or not. Did you see others in that environment, like maybe gravitating to drugs, gravitating to hustling, and did you try to stay away from that at a young age, or was that something that kind of piqued your interest?
So you see that a lot. I think you see it almost everywhere. You know what I'm saying? In all hoods, you see it a lot. So yeah, I saw it. I was around it. I grew up in it. For the most part, though, having the responsibilities of my little brothers and sisters at that age, from 8 to 13 to 14, you know, my responsibility, my duties was, you know, in the house, going to school, that kind of thing. My dad actually came back around that time, but by then my mom had met somebody else, which is my younger sibling's father, and he was around, and you know, he was in that game. And that's how he took care. That's how bills got paid. That's how, you know, the step up from out of the projects, you know, that kind of thing. So he was around pretty much, you know, filling the gap. I was hanging around with him a little bit, and him, I loved him too. He was also another good man. But yeah, I definitely saw it, and eventually I got into it. It was just one of those unavoidable things, I think, looking back at it then as a kid.
At what age were you then when you say you got into like drugs and stuff?
13, 14. I didn't actually do any drugs. I mean, I smoked weed, but I didn't do any hard drugs. But I got into it maybe 13, hanging around with my cousins, my homies, you know, just trying to, I think, just knowing what your siblings need, what's missing, you want to help. You know what I'm saying? Any man or any brother or any son is going to have, you know what I'm saying, the will, you know, want to have things to want to help. I can't get a job. You know what I'm saying? So options is limited, so what else can I do? So just adding a little, at that time, $60, $80, $100 to the table, that kind of thing, or just being able to walk around. My little sisters and brothers, they walk around. I can't get them, you know, get them a little candy or something, maybe even take them to the barber shop. That thing, you know, gives you a little pride. You know what I'm saying? So it makes you do that. I'm doing the wrong thing, but at the time, I think, you know, I felt like it was for the right reasons. So
now you mentioned the game and those of us who've done time, people from the streets, but we also have an audience that might not know what you mean. Exactly what did you mean by being in the game? Selling drugs? Were you armed robberies, boosting cars? What were you guys into?
I've tried a lot of stuff once, but most of it was just, you know, the selling, you know, just hanging out with my cousins, you know what I'm saying, my group in our neighborhood, and, you know, it was easy. You know, you standing on the block, you hustling, making some money, putting food on the table.
Selling weed, pills, crack? Well,
no, it wasn't no pills then.
Okay.
But weed and crack, yeah.
And this is, of course, mid to late teens. Were there any thoughts of, man, if I continue to do this, I might get caught? Did any of your friends around you, did you see any of them go to jail or get arrested?
Yeah, we go to jail. In that game, you're going to jail. It's not a matter of, you know, if you're going to jail, it's when you're going to jail. But you want to be in the best position to when you go to jail, I guess. So that's what we're hustling for. So you go to jail, you don't want to go to jail without having lawyer money. The will to get out of there, I mean, there's no other options. You know what I mean? There's no other options. Is you never think about getting out. You know, you think about trying to get as much as you can get. You know what I'm saying? It's actually make some kind of change. And until you see some kind of real change, getting out is not an option.
Definitely at the heart of what we talk about here, you know, me, myself doing 14 and a half years, Raul doing 12 years. We say this is a death or prison podcast, and what you're saying right now speaks to actually the heart of the whole title behind it, because there are individuals even watching who felt like they didn't have a way out. And so there were choices presented to them that basically presented to them what they thought was their way out of poverty, what they thought was their way to be able to get money to help their family. Was there anything going on at school that said, you know what, this is not going to be something that I do for the rest of my life? Were there any dreams or aspirations as a young man that you were saying, man, I'm going to do this right now to maybe help out at home, but this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. This is my dream or my passion.
Yes. I've had some opportunities presented to me in my life as a young kid on multiple occasions. The problem is I didn't recognize them at that time. I didn't recognize that it was an opportunity. It was one of those proverbial forks in the road that you can either, go left or go right. Education-wise, I had a teacher that thought I was pretty gifted at numbers. And so that teacher came out of his pocket and sent me to an upward bound program. So it was like a dual enrollment program while I was in school, while I was in alternative school, actually, as a matter of fact. And so I was enrolled in school, and I ended up going to FAMU for the summers. So that was a completely different outlook, you know what I'm saying, at 15, going in, on the college campus, getting familiar with the environment, that kind of education. So that was different. But I grew up in church. I grew up in church in Fort Pierce with the Save Our Children, and they've been in my life my entire life almost. And I've had plenty of opportunities there that I didn't recognize as opportunity at that time. I had a lot of stuff instilled in me that came back later on, so to help me stay, solid, come back home. But yeah, I have opportunities. And I think most of us have opportunities. Most of us are given opportunities, and we just don't recognize them as opportunities because you can't see the bigger picture. You're ready for a solution right now, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
we want the solutions right now, this moment, instead of, playing the long game. So yeah, had opportunities, fumbled them.
Yeah, I've seen a pattern in God that he's the type of God that will always give you the opportunity. The day before SWAT hit my house with helicopters and everything, I had a friend who came over and says, listen, there's a Christian conference that's coming and I got you tickets. And I remember thinking in my head, man, I don't want to hear that Jesus stuff, I knew there was a God, but I felt that you Christians were all fanatics and so on. But as I look back now, God was giving me the opportunity, and he always gives you free will. But if we persist, I was hard-headed. Johnny, you went through some circumstances where you could have gone the right route, but we make the wrong decision and we end up where we end up. But his grace will carry us through a lot of times, and he has a purpose. And that's why, Will, you're here, man. Be an inspiration to a lot of people who are watching right now.
All of this dealing with the drugs in the game, was there a time that you get arrested the first time and it was kind of like a slap on the wrist? How did that begin?
No, I've never been arrested for selling drugs. I've never been arrested. My only arrest, God forgive me, thank God, has been for driving on a suspended license.
You have this 23-year sentence that we mentioned at the beginning. Mm-hmm. What led up to that point?
I got too far in the streets. I got too far in the streets. I ended up doing a program behind getting arrested one too many times for suspended license. Mm-hmm. While I was away, I had a family member die. It's one of my cousins. He died, and that was a changing point on me mentally. So yeah, so I got back out, got too far gone, and it led up to me committing a robbery because I needed money to do other things. So yeah, that's what led up to that.
Now, well, one of the things that we do on this program is we make sure not to glorify the crime or the sin. But there are people watching that will probably identify. Could you go into a little bit more details? What was the robbery? What did you plan it? What actually happened? And then what was it that they charged you with, and,
All right, so
and how you got arrested?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so I got formally charged with robbery with a weapon. At that time, I hadn't committed whatever. You know what I'm saying? So I'm used to out here just, robbing, stuff that come on the streets. I came back, I was in a situation, and I needed money to get around and, stay afloat. So instead of doing one of the hard robberies, which is, the hard robberies, trap houses, that kind of stuff, I did an easy robbery. And yeah, so that was a gas station, which was something that, in our things, kind of easy at the time, I thought. And that's what I got arrested for. Got arrested for that. So I was on the run for 2 years, trying to get away. Came back. Other charges that I got charged with was dropped, and this is one of the ones that stuck on me. And of all the things for me to go to jail, I went to jail for this robbery, which in hindsight is probably saved my life. To be honest, probably saved my life.
Amen.
So,
I talk about the Jonah and the fish and how we get swallowed up. Instead of a physical fish in the ocean, we get swallowed up by a steel fish. And if you remember the story of Jonah, this is your homework, those of you listening, go back and read the story of Jonah and how Jonah got a call from God. You're talking about your relationship with Christ at an early age and how Jonah got that call to go to Nineveh. Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh. Jonah went the opposite way. And that's how sometimes we are. We go the opposite way of where God is trying to call us to. But God has a way of swallowing us up and making us go there anyway. And so you're at this pivotal point where you're in the county jail, you're facing, what were they telling you were facing when you were arrested on this armed robbery?
a life sentence.
Life sentence.
Facing a life sentence, PBL, punishable by life.
Is mom, stepdad, anybody in the picture encouraging you, coming to visit you at this point to help you with this decision?
My mom is there in the picture, but again, I'm the firstborn, so this is her first real dealing with the system. So she's learning. She's in the blind. She don't know. At that time, I think she was working in a packing house, so didn't have no money to try to get me a lawyer. But my church family, my spiritual father and mother, they came to my aid and assistance. And so I got some help there. So that's where I was at with that.
It's interesting, Will, you mentioned that it probably saved your life. And maybe somebody watching out there might say, my God, 23 years, how could you even say that? But there's an adage that you hear a lot, behind the wall, where I didn't get arrested, I got rescued. And that was my case. I was hard-headed, and I probably would have been dead right now, and God will use prison. So a lot of you that are watching right now, it doesn't matter where you came from, what you did. God has a purpose. It's just a matter of you recognizing, taking responsibility, and actually looking up. We're not talking about religion or becoming a member of my church or giving a donation. Just talk to him. Isn't that right, Johnny?
Yes. Just talk to him right where you are. Did you have a conversation? Was this a trial? Was this a plea deal?
No, this was a trial.
Okay, so you went to trial.
Yeah, I took it to trial based on, the evidence. At that age, you think you're smart, think you know it all, So I took it to trial, hoping I could find some loops, some holes in the evidence, loopholes, that game. And I got dropped down to a lesser charge, and I got sentenced to 25. So on that 25, I ended up doing 23.
Wow.
So that's how that worked out.
And you were 18, 19?
I was 18 when I got arrested,
18.
19 when I actually
Got sentenced.
got sentenced. Yeah.
They say 25 years. They take you through the process. Let's speed up to that first day that you step foot up inside of a prison.
In prison?
Yes. At 19 years old.
So you hear a lot of stories in jail before you get to prison. And so, again, I know I've done a lot of things. I've been around a lot of messed up people. I understand the way they think. So before I made it to prison, I think I kind of tried to prepare myself for prison, the attitude, what's to come. So at that time, my mind was pretty set on, I'm gonna do whatever I got to do my first couple of days in prison. It don't matter what's going on. I'm gonna do whatever I got to do to make sure that I'm not one of these dudes that get taken advantage of for the long haul. So my mind state was, I don't know, I think it was right at that time. Some of you guys been in prison, so y'all understand, in some of these camps that we're at, you can't go into a lion's den or being dropped off in a lion's den talking nutritional facts with a lion, like, hey, I'm not good to eat, that kind of stuff. So in order to survive in here, you got to be another lion. And that's just what it is. That was just to my understanding. Kind of still is. But
Where is God at in the picture? Was there something that you connected before you got there, or did you decide when you got there, I'm going to go to the chapel? Your church family, are they still in the picture at this point?
yeah, God has been there with me since day one. Since day one, all the way until I walked out, still right now. Again, I told you I grew up in the church. And at some point, I was in the church 3-4 days out of the week. So the church was just part of my makeup. It was part of what, my moral makeup, my ethics, the way I think. I'm not saying I'm a good dude, but I don't do bad things just to be just doing it. That makes kind of sense to you?
Yes.
Yes.
God has been there since day one. I've always had my Bible. I've always prayed. I didn't have nobody else to go to. I don't got nobody, I could talk to and get stuff off my chest. You can't talk to my mom because she's, firstborn son is in prison. My dad is not in there, so you can't write. They can't read or write English, so it's not like I'm communicating. Can't get any phone calls, so I'm pretty much in here by myself.
There's ways to do your time. There's people sometimes that we get locked into programs. There's other times that we get locked into a certain job, and that kind of becomes the consuming factor of our life. How did you decide, or were there periods where you were doing this and then from this point to this point it shifted, or were you doing something the whole time to kind of keep yourself occupied and keep yourself focused?
I went through several different shifts in prison. Doing 23 years, prison changes. It changes. It's like, technology. Every 3-4 years, the environment changes, the rules change, the official everything changes. So I think I was adapting with it. So when I first got there, I was in the chain gang mode, doing the stuff, falling for the things that they want you to fall, playing sports, being outside, gambling, that kind of thing. But playing sports for the sake of sports, stuff happens on the basketball court. It's a competition. People get angry, and that might lead to something else. Playing cards also leads to something else. I'm just trying to distract myself, I guess, looking back at it, distract myself from the fact of, I got 25 years. So, and I ain't got nobody to turn to. I'm trying to fight my case. And you know how the cases, when you put them in court, 3.850s, 3.800s, it takes time to get responses. So in between waiting for those responses, you're trying to keep yourself occupied. So yeah, I went through that phase. Then I got introduced to an older gentleman, and he was in his books. He was in religion, heavy.
We're going to get into a little bit more in depth as to how you were coping with prison life, how you dealt with it. The gentleman that you mentioned, how long have you been home though?
In May, we'll be home a year.
Well, there's a lot of people watching right now, and I remember one of the things that inspired me and motivated me when I was locked up were people who were making it and made the transition, getting out of prison and doing the right thing. Talk to some of the audience members. If you have something on your heart that you would like to tell them.
In my experience, I met a lot of people that did a lot of bad things, but inherently they're good people. They want to be good people. So what I would say to that person is, pay attention to that voice that's inside your head, right? Pay more attention to that voice that's speaking inside of you, and don't be afraid not to listen to everybody else that's around you telling you outside stuff. Those mornings when you wake up in the middle of the night, something's trying to communicate with you, pay attention.
You just said something that's biblical. You're not going to find the voice of God in the thunderstorm. It might not be something dramatic, but that still small voice. Psychologists call it a conscience, but he'll communicate and he'll start talking to you. And you're definitely right, my brother. Listen to that voice.
Listen to that voice.
There's a scripture that says, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, and slow to wrath or anger. And I think that it's imperative that as you're listening to Will's story, that you find yourself somewhere along the way, you can see yourself, whether it was that growing up with that praying grandmother or that family or that church like I was, and you kind of turn like Jonah, and God says, well, I'm going to get you to your Nineveh, whether you want to go there or not. And that's what happened with Jonah, where for you it was 23 years inside of the belly of that steel fish. For me, it was 14 and a half years. And for Raul, it was 12. But when God spit us back out, here we are operating in exactly what God has called us to operate in. This podcast is a part of that, is what God is using to speak to you today, to say that voice that has been talking to you about going to the chapel, talking to you about praying, that has been speaking to you through chaplains, speaking to you through mom, dad, siblings. That's not just their voice, that's the voice of God. This is the Death or Prison podcast, brought to you by leanonmeusa.org. I am Johnny Branham. To my right, Mr. Raul Lopez. You've been hearing testimony and a conversation with Mr. Will Sauveur. Now, this is the Death or Prison podcast, but we say choose life.